Greetings my fellow earthlings and a very warm welcome to you all. Today I have a Heuer Carrera from the 1970s with a rare movement which descended from a movement that claimed to be here first, the first automatic chronograph. But it's not the only movement to claim this title of I was here first. Zenith with its El Primero and Seiko also claim that they were here first. This argument has been going on since 1969 and still there is no peace. So who are you going to believe? As they say, it's complicated. This poor thing has got parts and organs missing. Some parts are damaged. It's also undergone some sort of reconstructive torture surgery without anesthetic with some sort of makeshift welding device. He's even tried to colour the hands with a false shade of propaganda and tried to convince everyone else that it's a perfect colour match. Well, it is when it's dark. The chronograph doesn't work due to missing parts. The hairspring has been fiddled around with and the case has been poorly finished. But we are here to put our arms around it and free it from its previous brutal occupation.
Someone's tried to weld an operating lever onto that. Cheeky little tinkerer. None of the pushers seem to be working, but if I turn it upside down, this one seems to work, not this one. If I turn it back over, none of them are working. And you can see the strange layout of the two subsidiary dials. One is at 3 and one is at 10, and the crown is on the left with the two pushers on the right. There's the dodgy welding. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how not to repair a flyback lever. Looks like he used a TIG welder or something. Good try though. Give him that. Look at the state of those hands. Looks like somebody's tried to paint that with some bogey. That hand setting feels a bit groggy. So instead of an hour counter, this one's got a subsidiary seconds, which means less parts, thus saving a bit of change to the overall cost. Bit of rust on that. Now then, I can dismantle this whole thing as one unit. Dubois de Poix chronograph module 8510, which has been piggybacked onto a Buren automatic movement. But where's the automatic rotor? I hear you ask me. Well, that's tucked away underneath, and according to the service manual, you can actually put this whole chronograph module in the wash without dismantling it, like so. There you can see with this little Micro-Rotor rotor there. Cool. Beautiful blued screws. So that's the whole Dubois de Poix chronograph module. You could put this whole thing in the wash. Because we know there's been some welding and some tinkering, we'll dismantle the whole thing. So there should be an oscillating pinion that goes there, and it's not on the movement. So that's missing. So we have to get ourselves an oscillating pinion and flyback lever. Oh, so that's going to be fun to find. Easy now. So you can see all the huge gap here where the gears would be for the hour counter. So we'll look to see. We'll start off with this hammer cam jumper spring. Seems like there's a bit of rust on there. Minor. And the minute recorder jumper. Looks like this thing had a very small amount of water ingress at some point. Now we can remove the chronograph bridge, which are held in with these 3 screws. See how short that screwdriver blade is? I've had that for about 10 years and it's been sharpened and damaged and then sharpened
time after time. There's just a stub. And then we remove the chronograph runner and the minute recording runner. And we have the coupling clutch unit, which is held in by this one screw. And then we have the coupling clutch spring. There she is. I suppose this blocking lever could have come off. Oh well. Now we'll remove the hammer. And we'll remove the operating lever, the reverser. And we have the flyback lever with its reverse threaded screw. It's got this extra slits, and this is the bit that was bush fixed. Man's a genius. You can see it's at an angle, and also it's got that blob of welding on the surface, which would cause some clearance issues. And there's the connecting plate, and we've got the sliding gear spring, sliding gear bridge, and we have just a little friction spring. So in manual wind mode it seems very groggy. Something's going on there. So let's remove the balance on the micro-rotor. So 1969 may have been a famous year for a lot of things, including the race to the moon, but it was also a year famous for the race for the first automatic chronograph. Manual wind chronographs were around for decades prior to 1969, but no one had yet done an automatic. There were three groups in this race, one being Zenith with their El Primero, you had Seiko with their Calibre 6139, and then you had a third group, which was a consortium including Heuer, Breitling, Hamilton Buren, and Dubois de Prat. Got a couple of springs here. And before I go any further, I'll just put a bit of oil on that driving wheel there, just to loosen it up a bit. This joint venture by this consortium of big boys gave birth to the Calibre 11, a piggyback construction based on a micro-rotor automatic movement by Buren and a Dubois de Prat chronograph module. Over the next few years, before the quartz crisis fully kicked in, the Calibre 11 quickly evolved into the Calibre 12, 13, 14 and the 15. And these movements powered Heuer's racing pedigree watches such as the Monaco, Otavia, Monza and Carrera. The Calibre 15 that we have today was obviously the last in the line without considering the Valjoux base 7740. So I'm assuming it was during the initial mayhem of the quartz crisis because the Calibre 15 was produced to cut costs. Hence why the hour counter has been deleted and a subsidiary seconds hand shoehorned in. And we have this lower bridge for the automatic device, which houses the wigwag pinion, two massive jewels, which allows that to slide around, that wigwag pinion. There's also a little stop click here, you can see, just there. So that top pivot is broken, which is why it was a bit groggy. And we'll remove this intermediate ratchet wheel. So now we have this crown wheel, which this one is reverse threaded, so be careful with that one. Now the barrel bridge doesn't have any additional screws, like so. Can just slide out. Finally, We can remove the train bridge and remove all the train gear. So this automatic movement with a micro-rotor is a Buren Calibre 1281, and it was never designed to have a chronograph module stuck on its back in such an unholy matrimony, and as a result of such an unplanned marriage, we have some weird consequences. The main plate had to be rotated 180 degrees, giving us a left-handed crown, and the reason why this movement was selected for this project was that the micro-rotor design kept the overall height of the movement down, which made it a good candidate for adding more onto it without turning it into a big lumpy brick. Some battle scars there by the looks of it. Now I'm not sure how many of these movements were ever produced, but I don't think it was that many, and the information on them is very scarce, and the parts that I need for it will also be hard and expensive to source. So maybe this sets this one up as one for the Grail watch collectors, if not already now, then maybe in the future. And since it was developed by a consortium of brands, you'll find the movement in other brands such as the Breitling Chronomatic and even in some Dugenas. Some date indicator driving wheel. Little bridge with a minute wheel. That's really cool. A fair amount of parts there. And some missing that I've ordered. Now I've had to whittle down the case restoration on this video to a few minutes, but there is a longer version of the case restoration which you can watch here up top and is available on the channel for those of you who enjoy this part of the restoration. You can see just got that right on there. Check the sides. It's got the sides as well. So if my table is accurate, all of that should come off. Like so. You can see the shine underneath that wax. So that is the third line. I'll just do that flat surface around the bezel.
There isn't a post for this click, but it will be moving around. So put a little bit here. And put a little bit on the top because there's a shouldered screw. We have this big fat jewel here for the wigwag pinion. I'm assuming we can put a sum on here. It sort of floats around. And we'll put a little bit on top here. And that will get onto the jewel. Pivot. That spring. So you can see the bearing for the second wheel is on this side, so you could do this little section first if you want, if you have difficulty lining up the train from the other side. But you know me,
I don't want peace, I want problems always.
But if you have done it this way, then just make sure that second wheel pivot just lines up with this pivoting position here. And just put a little bit on there and that will spread. Put a bit here if you want as well.
Have you ever seen a balance do that? 4 lines going on there. After a few adjustments, I've now created some snow. So this hairspring isn't attached to a stud, but instead sits inside a clamp, and at some point it must have broken off at the end, and the previous tinkerer thought he could fiddle around with the bends and tuck in the now shorter spring just to get it rocking. I didn't realise this at first, so played around with the bends myself. In the end, I had to order a new spring. Looks much better, doesn't it?
So on this new hairspring you can see where it's fixed in that clamp. The previous hairspring broke off just here, and then obviously if it's broken here he's had to pull the rest of the hairspring into the clamp, thus making it shorter. Taking it off center and lopsided.
Oh, I wish I had a son who would love me like I love him, who would bring me some coffee without me having to ask him.
I did that yesterday.
Oh, you're here, are you? And now we have our flyback lever. There's the one our welder friend bush fixed. And there's the replacement. Let's start off with this little friction spring. Not friction. Sliding gear bridge. Or is that a cock? This is the sliding gear. But they saved a bit of money by deleting our counter. And slide that under the bridge like so. Random screw that just sits there. And we've got the sliding gear spring. There are a few rust stains on this movement here and there. So on the Calibre 12 and the 11 you would have had an extra gear here connecting to the rest of the hour counter works, which are also missing on this one, and instead they replaced it with the subsidiary seconds, and even then they've just slapped it on, hence why it's not symmetrical and doesn't sit at 9, instead it sits at 10, because they couldn't be asked, I suppose. The whole point was to make this one a bit more affordable, so redesigning it too much would obviously put the cost up again. And I've got the operating lever and the reverse is already attached to it. Didn't even come off in the wash. Let's get this flyback lever spring on. And we can oil the tip of this friction spring. Put on that chronograph runner and the minute recording runner. Done. We have this little minute
recorder jumper spring rest. And there's the jumper spring.
Oh my god.
What are you guys doing?
Intruder alert.
And now we can put the hammer on. You're disgusting, you are.
What, I just burped?
That wasn't a burp.
Ew.
That was a mouth fart.
Ew.
And now we'll replace the hammer cam jumper. And again, I had to remove some rust from this so you can see some of the bruising on it. And now we have the spring for the coupling clutch. And I'll just oil that reverser. And we'll just oil the 2 screws for the operating lever. We can clean away the overspill. And we'll do the same for the flyback screw.
Now this method of oiling is based on the assumption that you didn't dismantle the whole chronograph module.
So look at the bravery of this design. The minute counter shaft has to go through the auto rotor, through to the other side and onto the dial. It's crazy. So I'll just put the chronograph module on. So I'm just going to put the oscillating pinion in, and you can see there's a jewel just there that I won't have access to later, so I'll put a bit of oil on there now. So I'm going to install the braking lever now. This dial is very delicate, so I'm not going to provoke it too much. Just a fresh piece of radical. Tension on this spring, you can see it's all stopped. It's having difficulty sliding over the teeth. Let's see what happens now. There's that finger coming round. And it stopped again at that point. So I need to sort out this little jumper here. Looks a bit deformed. And that's providing too much tension. Does look a bit strange. And then we can engage that braking spring and just mop everything up nice and tidy.
So I'm just going to see how close that mustard color is and see whether I need to mix it to get it as close to the original as possible. Pretty close actually. So what I'll do, dab a little paint on the section where somebody's tried to fill it in and see what it looks like. No harm in doing that. Or that little bit here where it's missing, and then I'll remove all the paint and then redo it. So let's just try it out on this little section here. I think it might need a little bit of orange on there. That looks pretty close, so I know it can be achieved. I have the other hands as reference, so I'll just clean this one down and then start fresh. A little bit of rust on there, so just give that a little rub. So here's the first attempt, and the application doesn't look very even with these little foam tips, so I might have to use a brush. So let's start again. That's what it looks like next to the other two, and we'll call it a day there.
Looks like it's a gasket that's just solidified, turned into crust, so I'll have to manually clean it.
So I'm nearly done here, friends. Thank you all for chilling out with me today, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. A lovely little Carrera that doesn't require many eulogizing words from me. In the past I would have been able to wax lyrical about it like a waterfall, but I don't have many words to utter nowadays. My tongue is numb. I have seen enough cruelty over the past 4 months to last me a lifetime. My eyes are sore. My ears are ringing from all the silence they have heard and all the screams they have ignored, throwing my soul out of balance. Where are all the Bob Geldofs of the world? Is this current bandwagon not lucrative enough to jump on? Oh well, I guess it's up to us now. We can pray for peace and justice, but we also have to take some steps. Take 1 step towards me, and I shall take 10 towards you, he says. An avalanche starts with a few snowflakes, and this one is halfway down the mountain. Look after yourselves, folks, and take care of each other. Peace, love, and blessings to you all. And if the Almighty wills, I'll see you on the next one. Ta-ra.
By a lonely border wall, I heard a young man calling. Nothing matters, Mama, when you're free. Against the Zionists and the crown, I threw stones, they ran me down. Now you must carry on with dignity. Low lie the fields of Palestine, where once they watched the small free birds fly. Their love was on the wing. They had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Palestine. By a lonely bomb shelter, she watched her last child falling. As the army tanks rolled on into their home, oh, she'll wait and hope and pray that she'll live to see the day she can grieve in peace in her dear Palestine. Low lie the fields of Palestine, where once they watched the small free birds fly. Their love was on the wing. They had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Palestine. It's so lonely round the fields of Palestine.